How do you respond to passive aggressive, in passing, or flippant comments? That's a great question. Give me an example, Danny.
So it's a family dynamic. So I
Mm.
know I'm at that, but that is a thing that's very common.
Mhm.
And the example was so silly, but I wasn't sure how to address it. I had just gone out, I had purchased acai bowls for family members,
Mhm.
parents, my daughter and I. And then later on in the afternoon, we were having a party. My son and my daughter-in-law that were staying elsewhere had called to ask if we wanted like a bite for lunch. And so I said yes. I checked in with my dad. He said he wasn't hungry. There's a knowing that my stepmom doesn't eat a lot and she had just had a acai bowl because she's trying to lose weight. And so after the kids came, there was food out and, we were kind of eating before a party started. And she's like, "Oh, where'd the food come?" And I was like, Adam and Lauren brought it. And then she literally is just in passing me. It's like, "Well, it would really be nice to be considered." And then just walk out of the room. And it's kind of her MO. And my human part came out with my dad because I
Mhm.
was like, "What? I don't even know who she's talking to." This part was not skillful, but I just said, "This passive aggressive shit has got to stop." So I know. And so that was to my dad because she disappeared.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and that happens a lot between the dynamic with them, but I'm like, how would I, if they've already left the room or they just snarkily make a comment? I just was curious what kind of script you might have for that.
Okay, relational context matters. So there are many, many ways of dealing with this depending upon the relationship. So let's just work with this one. I just want to acknowledge that from a start because I
Okay.
think my instant go-to, which may or may not work in this situation, so you can fill me in, would
Mhm.
literally be to go after that person if I cared about the relationship. And I might, maybe not in that moment. And by go after, I don't mean call them out on something, but I think I would revisit that moment with that person. And I would say something like, when you left the room and you said, it would be nice to be considered, and then you walked, can we just debrief that a little bit? I'm wondering if you were feeling hurt in that moment, or disappointed, or disoriented. It sounds to me like you had the experience in that moment of not being fully held with care and consideration. That's what I took from your comment. I wanted to just double check. Is that true? Is that happening for you? If you said that, what do you imagine she would say?
Probably with some energy behind it, like, of
Mhm.
course, you
Yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
always good to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
what
what
I'm
I
going,
struggle with,
Mhm.
Yvette, is the double messages
Yeah.
of, I don't eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then here's this. So
Of
that's
course
where it
you
gets
do.
a little
Of course you do.
confusing.
Of course you do. So
Okay.
I'd slow it down into the pieces. The first piece,
Mm-hmm.
reflecting what you're hearing from her back to her and getting validation that you're hearing it accurately.
Yeah. So
I
probably the
hear,
consideration,
yep.
I guess, just being
Yeah,
asked.
you would have liked to have been
Uh,
asked. But the first piece, if we want to, is we're collecting someone. This person dropped a little bomb in the room and then disappeared. Okay, so they abandoned. And we're not going to see that as something bad and wrong. We're not going to see that as, oh, they shouldn't do this and blah, if we can. Okay, what we want to get to is, oh, there's some fear, there's some hurt, there's something going on under that, and they're not in a place where they're willing to be vulnerable yet. The first thing that I want to do is establish safety and trust. So the way that I'm going to establish safety and trust is, if I care, I might collect them and I might say, hey, were you feeling hurt? And I'm going to let them speak first. I'm going to be able to contain me first. Okay. And I'm giving you the ideal, and then we can talk about all the work that we need to do internally so that we can do this thing, because this is high level practice. But so I'm going to listen first. You were feeling hurt. You would have liked to have been asked. It meant to you that you weren't being considered. The way that it rolled out with me just deciding, blah, 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 meant to you that you weren't being attuned to. And what you're really highlighting and making explicit is the meaning the other person made of the neutral action. I may know personally, I was doing everything that I could to be considerate of you. I thought that I was actually like caring for you by seeing all of these things and putting together the most accurate and attuned conclusion. I don't bring that in the early stages. I let them tell me about their experience first, and I express care for their experience. And where it differs from my intention, I make a note about it, but I highlight for them and I reflect back to them their meaning making. I validate what it meant to them. I may not agree with it, but I'm going to validate their experience. It meant this, it meant that. You want to be considered, you want to be asked. Got it. Until they get the experience of being received. That's the first step. Then that very often helps the other person's defenses come down, and it gives them an on the ground experience of something different than what they were expecting, because what they're expecting is a fight. What they're expecting is defensiveness. What they're expecting is more of the same. If you bring more of the same, then we're entrenching the pattern. So we've got to bring something different if we want to change the pattern. Then I might say, once I notice their nervous system re-regulating, if I provide enough empathy, enough understanding, enough being seen and heard without any idea of wrongness to the other person, if I'm able to do that, they will take a deep breath at some point. They will go, yeah, exactly. I mean, I can't believe you, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they may still throw these little barbs. We're going to surf those waves. And then we might say, it's really helpful for me to hear that from you. It's really helpful for me to understand. And I was a little surprised and confused, because here's what was happening for me. I thought I put these two things together and they lived in me like a mixed message, and I got it wrong. I thought this and you're telling me it's this. And then I would find out how they respond to that, and to try and show them, oh, I thought I was being considerate, but it makes sense to me how it didn't come across to you that way. So now we're going to try and get to some shared understanding and a little bit of connection and some learning about what the assumptions were that were being made by both sides. And we're going to hold that as if there's nothing wrong. There's just learning. We were doing the best we could, and now we're learning. And then at the very tail end, if that conversation goes well, then I might bring in, it was challenging for me when you made that comment and then left the room. I would love to find a way that we can talk about these things in a more direct and kind way. Would you like that too? I wasn't sure what to do when you left the room. I wasn't sure if I should come after you. I wasn't sure if it was meant to make me feel bad. I don't know what to do in those moments. And it's a dynamic that I don't enjoy. Do you enjoy it too or not? How would you have liked me to interpret that? What works or doesn't work for you about doing that? Then I would talk about the moment and how we might be able to do this differently the next time. Okay, so hearing all of that, Danny, what comes up? What else do I need to understand?
I think you understand it well. It's now practicing it. It's like the sense of stepping in a lion's den.
Yeah.
And so there's a little fear and trepidation there.
Yeah.
I'm willing to explore this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be the only one in my entire family doing this. And there's always strings attached to things. So it's really complicated. But I was just looking for ways of navigating that conversation, because it is literally how everybody talks to each other. Mostly my parents, I'll just say in this particular instance, like I had a whole week of that, and this was at the tail end. So I was already like maxed out to look through it, which is why I snapped at my dad. It wasn't at him. I kind of passive aggressively threw out my own stuff in his lap, because he saw it all and makes excuses for it. And I was like, nope, no excuses. I was like, my defenses were down already. I know I was snarky in the moment.
Yeah, I love it. Your defenses were actually up.
Yeah, I said
yes,
that backwards.
And your capacity was down.
Yes.
Okay, it's just to be,
I'm still decompressing from the week. I just got back. Yes.
Totally. And so the other thing I'm hearing you say, it lives in me like this. I am exhausted. I am tired of this. I don't have the awareness and the capacity and the resourcefulness and the courage in the moment to have the clarity about showing up in a way that actually transforms this. It is painful for me, and I'm needing more empathy and filling up and self-compassion and self-resourcing if I'm going to choose to do something differently in the family system and not just keep repeating it with them. And so that's a really beautiful place for you to find yourself, this place of, I want this to go differently. And then working with myself right now in being tired and scared and hurt, and first tending to my own needs. How do I get some empathy for what it's like for me? How do I get a little bit of space from this dynamic? How do I get more self-compassion and self-care for what I'm needing in those moments? And I need to fill up first, because I'm not going to be able to change or transform anything if I don't have that energetic resource to bring. And I'm not going to get it from this family system with this dynamic right now. So where can I go and get that? And then also acknowledging this longing you have for it to go differently and for you to be bringing something different to that moment, while being really, really gentle with yourself, that you're not forcing yourself into anything that you're not ready for or that you're not feeling resourced for. How's that landing?
It lands well. And like I said, it was at the tail end, and it had been kind of an emotional roller coaster ride through the week anyhow.
Mhm.
And it's something I've noticed. My daughter was with me, and so she tends to shut down with that kind of. And so I was like navigating her emotions and
Mhm.
trying to, because she's, I don't know, catching what we're learning here. Cause like
Mhm.
she's in the background sometimes and she's listening to you. So she's like, what would Yvette do?
She's catching it. That's an
She's
interesting, like a virus.
so, she's like kind of learning. And I said, this is like years and years of dynamic. Thankfully, we live in a different state and we don't see them a whole lot. And it's awkward. It's uncomfortable because we know that there's gossip. We hear it about
Mhm.
everybody else. I don't see why we wouldn't be spoken about.
Mhm.
So that was just one of those moments where I was just, I don't think I have it. And I said, we're just going to let this pass for right now.
Yeah,
And I'll
yeah.
come back to it once I kind of navigate it. So I was aware of what was happening. I've seen it before. And I think, like you said, I just needed to give myself that break and
Mhm.
not really go into it, even though I did
Mhm.
my own
Yeah, yeah.
passive aggressive
That's
comment.
okay. That's okay.
And, because it just gets old,
It does get
it's
old. I don't know if you were on the call yesterday, but we were talking about, we either repeat something or we transform something, right? And when we're under resourced, we tend to just repeat it. So the passive aggressive stuff, I'm going to return like with it's my default. Transforming a dynamic takes intentionality and effort and consciousness. And we can only do so much at a time. So we don't try to change everything all at once. We just figure out what is our one next step. And then we just commit to that one next step practice. We can't change it all at once. So when we catch ourselves repeating something, it's important not to be self-critical about that. It's important to be self-compassionate about that. Oh, there I go. Oh, there I go doing the passive aggressive thing. If you can greet it with more softness and cultivate more empathy for it, it will actually become a place where you can empathize with other people who are doing it too instead of judging them. Then, when they do the passive aggressive thing, you will have available in you, oh, yeah, that's that thing humans do. They must be hurt and scared. And I know that place. But you'll begin offering them the same grace that you've practiced with yourself. That's why it's so important to offer ourselves a lot of that grace, because these are moments of shared humanity and of shared insight and for empathy of why we become defensive or why we become critical or why we become passive aggressive. One more tool for passive aggressive comments is making the implicit explicit. And we talk about this in Human 101. This is a skill where you literally just use it sounds like you're saying blah, 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 blah. Is that true? So passive aggressive, you've got to locate the conversation before you can respond to the conversation. Otherwise, it's too slippery. They just go into denial, 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 and then you're stuck in all the gaslighting. So the very first move when something is indirect is to make it direct, right? It sounds like you're saying that you're angry that you weren't asked. Is that true? Because when people become indirect, they don't give themselves permission to speak their truth. They think there's something fundamentally wrong with it, or it's not going to be received well, or they're going to get attacked for it. So they learn to speak in code. This is where passive aggressive language comes from. I learned to be indirect because I'm trying to avoid aggression. So I make my aggression covert instead of overt. And when we're fielding that, we want to put it on the table for what it is. So that would be another tool that you can use with anything. It sounds like you're saying blah, 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 blah. Is that true? And then even if the other person says, no, no, that's not at all what I was saying, then you can say, oh, thank goodness I checked that out with you. And often they're just saving face. That's exactly what they meant, but they don't want to cop to it. And that's fine. Then you work with that as well. When they realize what they were saying, you're really just giving that work back to them. And if they want to say, no, it isn't, give people an opportunity to update. They may be seeing or becoming aware of something in them that they didn't want to have be seen. Let people. It's okay. How's that landing, Danny?
I have two more questions. So
Yes.
is what you just said, I'm trying to remember, is any of that in Human 101?
Yep.
Like I would
There's
mean,
a
what,
whole module on making the implicit explicit.
and then is there like a timeline? Like this happened on Sunday, so it's not
Mhm.
that far removed.
Yeah.
Like, is it something I could address like in a couple days?
I would say that conversations are never over. We just do them in chunks, and you can put as much time between the chunks as you like. You can put as much, and you can revisit something that happened 5 years ago. In fact, I highly recommend in some families that people consciously and directly revisit the thing that happened 5 years ago, because otherwise it's festering in the unconscious of the system. But at any point you can say, you know, something has been sticking with me, or I've been trying to let go of something and I'm realizing that I'm not able to, and I'd actually just love to check in with you around it. You know, are you available? I'm remembering this moment. Do you remember this moment as well? Do you remember that moment where I brought the bowls and then it seemed like your feelings were getting hurt? I'm not sure if that's what was happening, but you left the room. Do you remember that moment? Sometimes if you can't come up with a neutral observation, you can say to the other person, how do you remember that moment? Tell me how that's living in your memory, right? Then you don't have to do all the work of figuring it out. Then they can be like, yeah, when you rudely left me out of blah, 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 and I needed to go and get some space, whatever it is that they say, you can be like, yeah, that moment. Actually, that's helpful for me to know that that's how it was for you. I was hoping we could debrief that moment. Here's what I'm wondering. Here's what is up for me around that. Here's what I'm longing for. Bring a softness, bring a tenderness, bring an exploratory spirit. It'll go better. Ask somebody to thought partner with you, reflect with you. It's not that you're coming back to provide them with an evaluation, an assessment, a conclusion, and a demand, which is how some of those conversations sometimes come across. How's that landing?
But it lands well. And as I've
Yeah.
said before, I wish I could carry around in my back pocket with like earbuds and you
Mhm.
can speak to me. I mean, I hear you in my head as well as other teachers, and it's definitely a higher level of conscious awareness. It's nice to know that like I can go back.
Mm.
And before I do, I want to make sure my cup is full. Just really reminding myself this isn't bad or good or right or wrong. It's just people's expressions, skillfully or unskillfully done. And the pause, I think, is a really helpful piece.
I love the way that you're sort of acknowledging for yourself the needs of your own that need to be met in order to accomplish this goal that you have in the long term. The biggest gift you can give your family system is your own healing and your own resourcing. So put that first. Go get the empathy you need, get the rest you need, give yourself the time and the space to get the awarenesses you need. There's no pressure, there's no rush, there's no timeline. Be very, very nourishing to yourself. And the rest, these intentions that you have for the dynamics you're wanting to shift, they will follow naturally. Yeah.
And it is what some of the work we did yesterday, even though I wasn't really on camera,
Yeah.
like I would be able to do the hindsight and
Yep.
foresight kind of work around too,
Yep.
like
Absolutely.
imagining how this would go next time, because
Yep.
there will be a next time.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So for those of you who aren't sure what Danny's referring to, we were on a membership call yesterday where we were working through how to prepare for your next conversation. And one of the things we talk about in Human 101 is the importance of the three kinds of sight we develop: hindsight, which is what Danny and I are doing a little bit of now, looking back on a situation, right? And then foresight, which is next time or in the future, what would I like to have go differently? And then as you get back in the situation and then you do the same thing and you repeat it, and then you do some hindsight and some foresight, and then you get back in the situation, and there I go being passive aggressive just like the rest of them, and I'm annoyed with myself. And then you do some hindsight and you do some foresight, and you've got to go through those reps a whole bunch of times. And then we finally get to insight, where you find yourself with this person and suddenly you're saying it differently, and suddenly you have insight available to you. But it does take the intentional practice of going through that worksheet that we were working through yesterday, of talking about it, of feeling into it when I'm not in the situation, of giving myself time in between to become aware, of really committing to the practice of self-honoring, of self-nurturing, of self-nourishing, of getting the empathy that I need, and working gently with myself. Because the more that I learn how to do that with myself, the more it's available for everybody else. Yeah, good luck. I hope you get lots of empathy from lots more people before you try and have the conversation with her, so you can just get yourself resourced first. Thank you. Beautiful question. Stephanie has a hand up. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi. So if you use this wonderful, open, beautiful invitation, it sounds like you're saying, is that true? And they say, oh, no, no, not at all. Then you just give them grace at that point and you just say, oh, okay, because I thought maybe it was, and to let it go. Is that
Well,
what?
usually I say something like, well, I'm so glad I checked it out. Tell me what's an accurate interpretation, or catch me up. I thought it was this, and I'm happy to find out it's something different.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.